This week on Q&A, former United States Secret Service agent Clint Hill discusses his latest book titled Mrs. Kennedy and Me.
Clint Hill, author of Mrs. Kennedy and Me. What would be the difference if you were a Secret Service agent today and a Mrs. Kennedy that you knew then would come along? How would you do things differently?
Well, I know I'd have a great deal more assistance than I had in the past. Back in those days, there were only two of us assigned to Mrs. Kennedy. And today there are more than two. There's quite a few more. I don't know exactly what the number is, but that's very beneficial. Also, today there are female agents that are available. We didn't have that luxury back in 1960, 61, 62, 63. So that would have made a great deal of difference. I believe she would have been as popular today as she was then, which created problems because no matter where she went, it drew a crowd, and that caused a problem. But we managed to deal with it and handle things the best we could, and she seemed to be pleased with what we did.
You have a story in your book about a man named Rowdy Mims.
Yes, Rowdy Mims. Rowdy was a photographer in Washington, D.C., and he was somewhat of a harassment to me and to others, and on one occasion he did something that I was very upset about. I had arranged for Mrs. Kennedy to arrive in Washington, D.C. at National Airport on a military flight, which was very unusual for her, but to do so privately, a separate section of the airport, the National Airport. We had arranged for the White House cars to be situated outside the fence awaiting our arrival. And when we got the plane stopped and propellers were stopped and ready to let Mrs. Kennedy get off, they opened the gate to let the White House drivers bring the cars in. And as we walked down the ramp, I noticed not only the cars were coming in, but there was a motorcycle coming in, which was unknown to me or unscheduled. And there were two people on the motorcycle. The one in the back had a camera, and he was shooting away, and it was Rowdy Mims, and he had penetrated the security. So I ran, and I grabbed him, and I took his camera, and I took all his film. And we went to the White House. He was very upset. I had to turn him over to the police because of his activities. They didn't arrest him, but they held him for a while. When I got to the White House, the first thing that happened, I got word the president wanted to see me. So I went into the Oval Office, and there was the president, and he had Pierre Salinger, his press secretary, with him. And they said, what happened out at National Airport? So I explained the situation to them. And the president looked at me and said, unfortunately, you're going to be the scapegoat in this situation. We can't afford to have the press anger at us for what happened there at National Airport. And so you are going to get the blame. And we're going to return the film to the company that Rowdy's working for. So I gave them the film, and they gave it to the appropriate company, and I answered to my supervisors and explained that I was just doing the best I could to try and maintain her privacy. They understood. The president understood also, but he said, unfortunately, I was going to have to take the blame for it.
You didn't use a word in your book about Rowdy Mims, former UPI photographer. Did you accuse him of being obnoxious?
He was very obnoxious. One of the more obnoxious people that I ever dealt with, to be matter of fact. And I think I found that, I've heard that same story from other people, even other members of the press, that Rowdy Mims was, in fact, obnoxious.
There's a story in your book about Frank Sinatra and you taking a phone call.
I used to take a number of phone calls from Mr. Sinatra. He would call regularly. On one occasion he called, and it was in December of 1961 after Ambassador Kennedy had a stroke. And he wanted to talk to Mrs. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy. And I had informed, I'd been instructed to inform the operators that when he called, they were to channel those calls through me. And so I talked to him, and I explained to him that what was going on there. We were in Palm Beach at the time. And we talked for 10, 15 minutes about various things. And that was kind of a common occurrence. Whenever he'd call, I'd end up talking to him.
Why didn't Mrs. Kennedy take the call?
She just didn't find it necessary to talk to him all the time. She informed me that when she got around to it, she'd call him and say hello and visit with him for a while. But I don't know that she ever did. Perhaps so, but I'm not sure.
Your book has already been on the bestseller list, and you've been on a book tour. How many different cities have you been to?
Well, let's see. New York, twice. Kansas City, San Diego, La Jolla, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, Chicago, and Washington, D.C., and we still have more to go.
What have you found the public to be interested in when they've been questioning you?
They're just interested in the fact that this is a book that paints a portrait of Mrs. Kennedy, tells about her life, what she was really like during that 4 years that I was with her. There isn't any gossip in there, no salacious information. It's just what happened, what she was like, things that she liked to do, how humorous she was at times, how athletic she was at times, and how intelligent she was, and how kind of rambunctious she was. She tried to put me to the test many, many times, and I did my best to meet that test.
I wrote down a quote. Whatever you do in Greece, do not let Mrs. Kennedy cross paths with Aristotle Onassis. Who said that?
President Kennedy gave me that instruction in 1961 when Mrs. Kennedy went to Greece. The first time she went there alone. She went with her alone, had her sister Lee with her. She went there, she wanted to see the open air theater. We were on a yacht named the North Wind, I believe it was. And the instruction from the president before I went on advance, I did the advance for the trip, was not to let Mrs. Kennedy cross paths with Aristotle Onassis. And he gave me those instructions in the presence of his brother, the Attorney General. Now, when I went back to my office, I tried to research why, because I didn't know exactly why. And I found out that Onassis was in legal trouble with the United States government. And it appeared to me that the reason was for them not wanting the two to cross paths was it was going to be a political embarrassment for the president and for the party if she were seen in the company of Aristotle Onassis.
So how much time did she spend around him?
Never saw him. In
1961.
Never saw him in 1961. She had met him with the president at one time previous in an island off the coast of Europe. I'm trying to think of it, the Mediterranean, because his yacht was in the harbor. They were there. Winston Churchill was on board the yacht, and the then Senator Kennedy wanted to meet Winston Churchill, and they arranged through mutual friends, the Johnny Agnellis, to go aboard and meet Winston Churchill. So she had met him. She didn't see him in 1961. She did see him in 1963.
325-foot yacht named Christina.
Very nice yacht.
How much time did you spend on it?
I was there from the time that Mrs. Kennedy got on until she got off. It was about 10 days, I believe, almost.
And why was she there?
In August of 1963, she gave birth to a little boy, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy, up at Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts. And 2 days later, young Patrick died. And Mrs. Kennedy became very depressed. And her sister Lee flew in from London to be with her. Lee and her husband, the Prince Radziwill, happened to be friends with Onassis. And Onassis had offered her yacht, made it available if they wanted to use it for Mrs. Kennedy's use. And they decided it would be a good idea for her to get away for a while, and that yacht would make an excellent platform to just to tour at the area and get away from everything. And President Kennedy wanted her to do it. Members of the staff were very concerned about her doing this because there was a political year coming up, 1964. They were concerned about how it would look. But the president insisted that she be permitted to do it. And so we went aboard, toured the Greek islands, went up into Turkey, came back out, and it was a very, very pleasant cruise.
In your opinion, why did she end up marrying him?
I believe it was after Robert Kennedy was killed. She was very distraught about that. She was very concerned about the security of the children and herself, even though she had Secret Service protection at the time, up until she remarried. She was still concerned, and he offered something that nobody else could offer. He owned a private island, that's where they lived. He had a private yacht. He had an airline. He had a great big apartment and things in Paris. He had one in New York. He could offer her everything that she needed to guarantee her privacy and safety.
How many presidents have you worked for?
5. Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford.
When you think back of Dwight Eisenhower, which I haven't seen you talk much about, what do you remember? And how old were you?
When I first was assigned to Eisenhower, I was 27. And he was a retired general, 4-star general, I guess 5-star. And he was held in highest regard by everybody, worldwide. And for a young kid from North Dakota, which is where I came from, to be in the presence of the president was really special. And he was a remarkable man. He was quite personable, and so was Mrs. Eisenhower. He didn't call us by name. He just referred to us as, "Hey, agent," whenever he wanted us to do something or wanted to address us. But we respected him immensely. He was a great man to be around. And he loved to play golf, as everybody knows. We spent a lot of time on a golf course. And but we traveled a lot too. We traveled all through Europe, through Southeast Asia, and then through Asia itself down. And we went to the Philippines and Taipei and Korea. We had just an enormous experience for me anyway.
You mentioned North Dakota. What impact did it have on your life that you were adopted?
It really didn't affect me too much. When I was told, I was about 5 or 6 years old. A little girl across the street told me that she was teasing me. I was adopted. I didn't know what it meant. So I went home to my mother to, what was this adopted thing mean? What's that? And so she was very concerned about the fact that I had found out. She was afraid that I wouldn't have the same kind of relationship with she and my adopted father, knowing that I really was somebody else's child. But I also had a sister who was adopted. We weren't biological. She had been adopted before me. And we kind of formed a bond. We would never raise the issue with my mother because she was so concerned, and we never did until after she died in 1974.
Jack Kennedy, the president, called you Clint, according
Yes.
to your book.
Yes.
Any of the other presidents call you, "Hey, agent"?
Only Eisenhower. President Johnson called me Clint and a few other things.
Did he ever swear at you?
In my presence, yes. At me, I don't think so.
I've got some audio tape, you've probably heard this, of Mrs. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson talking after the assassination near the Christmas time in December of 1963. Let's listen.
I hope that you are doing all right.
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you.
Well, this Congress is getting pretty rough up here, and I may have to send for you before it gets through.
I hope you get home for Christmas, will you?
I don't know.
God, you're so nice to call me, Mr. President, because you must be out of your mind with work piled up.
I have a few things to do, but not anything that I enjoy more than what I'm doing now.
Oh, you're nice.
How's my little girl?
He's fine, and John just set off this awful jet plane. It's the noise you hear in the background.
Well, tell him hello, and I wish all of you a Merry Christmas, and I wish I could do something to make it happier for you.
Oh, no, you're so nice, and you've done everything you could.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And
You.
do you know how much we love you?
Oh, well, you're awfully nice.
You don't know?
No, I don't. Well, yes, I do.
You better know. All the 180 million love you, dear.
Oh, thanks, Mr. President.
And all the world, and I'll see you after Christmas, I hope. And if you ever come back here again, don't come to see me. Why, there's going to be trouble.
All right.
You don't realize I have the FBI at my disposal, do you?
No, I promise I will.
Well, I'm going to send for you if you don't come back.
Good.
Or someday they're going to create a traffic jam out there in Georgetown.
Okay, well, it'll
Now,
be great.
You have a good Christmas, dear.
Thank you. The same to you.
Good night.
Good night.
You spent a year with her after the assassination, and I think I read that you said she never wanted to look at that White House again.
she had a difficult time. It was very emotional for her. We left on December 6th. She moved over to Georgetown. And from that point on, she just did not want to go by the White House.
And I got it, she went back with Richard Nixon there.
Eventually, yeah. She went back there. I believe it was, I can't give you the year, but I think it was when her portrait was unveiled or something of that effect.
I vaguely remember 71, I could be wrong, but let's go back to your situation. You were 28 and she was 31.
Correct.
When you first met her. What are we hearing in this audio tape? Is it accurate about either one of their personalities?
Oh, I think it's accurate for both of them, sure. You know, that voice of hers is, unmistakable. That's her. That's the way she talked. That's the way she acted. And it's also President Johnson. It was all sweetness and light when he wanted to be. It was a lot different when he didn't want to be, but that was him. That's the way he was.
Who named this book, Mrs. Kennedy and Me?
It was kind of a joint effort, but mostly Lisa Mcugh came up with the idea.
Who is Lisa Mcugh?
She's the writer who actually should get credit for writing the book. She's a fantastic writer. You should talk to her sometime.
We had you here several months ago to talk about the Kennedy Detail, the other book that you did with Gerald Blaine. Yeah. When did you decide to do this book?
Well, during the process of that, I only contributed to that book and wrote the foreword for the Kennedy Detail. But Lisa Mcugh also wrote that book. She took the information that Jerry Blaine had put together and then worked on that and went to great lengths to obtain information from all the former agents she could contact. And she put all that information together. It was in that process that she asked for my help because I was in Dallas. And Jerry Blaine, who wanted to write that book, was not. And so they needed to talk to someone who had been there. And I got to know Lisa and trusted her, had confidence in her. In the process, she convinced me that the information I had about Mrs. Kennedy was really historical and should be documented. And over a period of time, she convinced me that's what I should do. And some former White House reporters came to me and said, you know, we covered the President and Mrs. Kennedy. We were never permitted to interview her. We never really knew her. You did. You owe it to the American people and the public to document that and put it down on paper. So after a while I thought, well, I might as well do it because I'm not getting any younger. And so I decided to go ahead and do it.
When was this book actually finished, the writing?
Well, we had a deadline of September 1st, which we didn't make. We finished it on, I believe it was November 1st of 2011.
Since you were last here, the 8.5 hours of conversations between Arthur Schlesinger and Mrs. Kennedy have been released. Here's just a small excerpt from it, and I want you to tell us again. This sounds like a different voice here a little bit on what she was saying.
It was so funny because Jack, thinking of being vice president and how awful it would be, gave Lyndon so many things to do. But he never did them. I mean, he could have made his Council on Human Rights or whatever it was into something, you know, going ahead with it, equal opportunity, whatever it was. He could have done more with the space thing. He just never wanted to make any decision or do anything that would put him in any position. So what he really liked to do was go on these trips. And he never liked, Jack would say, you could never get an opinion out of Lyndon at any cabinet or national security meeting. He'd just say, you know, that he agreed with them, with everyone, or just keep really quiet.
Were you there?
I was in the house. I talked to Arthur Schlesinger before he went into the room to interview her on each occasion and after he came out, but I was not in the room during the interview.
Recorded in 1964
Yeah.
between March and June. But what I want to ask you, Robert Caro's book is out talking about the really the distance between the Kennedys and the Johnsons and the difficulty that Mr. Johnson supposedly had when he tried to come into the presidency after the assassination. What did you see there? Did you see any of this?
Well, there was certainly a difference between the two. And over a period of time I saw it. In fact, it affected me in 1964 when I was transferred from Mrs. Kennedy back to the White House detail with President Johnson as president. One of the first things that happened was we went to the LBJ Ranch for Thanksgiving. And he spotted me as I was going from one post to another down there. And he put the word out to Rufus Youngblood and Lem Johns, who were the two agents probably closest to him, that he didn't want me around, that he knew I was had been with the Kennedys, and he didn't think I should be there. And they told me about it, and then Youngblood went talked to President Johnson and convinced him that I was there as a professional, that I wasn't there as political. And so he finally agreed to allow me to stay.
When did you end up heading up his detail?
2 years later.
And how did that go?
Well, it was just one of those things where there was going to be a change at the very top, and they had their choice between myself and another gentleman. And apparently they talked to the president, and I was selected for the job.
What did you do with Gerald Ford?
I was the assistant director for all protection at that time.
So you weren't on his detail?
I was not his detail. I was responsible for the men that were there.
How about Richard Nixon?
Same with him. During his term in office, I was promoted to assistant director.
What have you found that people expected from you in this book? You say no gossip, none of that. Have people thought, I mean, the picture on the cover, some people say, it implies that these two were very, very close, closer than just agent to protectee.
We were close, very close friends, very professional, but close. I mean, I knew a lot of her secrets and she knew all mine. So you're accurate by saying we were close. What I want people to get from the book is a better understanding of who she was, what she was like during that 4-year period, because there have been a lot of books written, and most of it has been written by people who have talked to friends of friends of friends. They really don't have the information themselves. I happened to be there. I knew her. We had a direct relationship, and so I finally decided it was time to put it on paper and let people know what she was really like.
Did she ever get mad at you? And if she did, when and why?
I think she got upset a few times because of certain things that either happened or, but she wasn't the kind that really got mad. I'm trying to remember anything that really upset her. I remember when she was thrown from a horse, or came off a horse because of the activity of a photographer. She was mad, but not at me. She was mad at the photographer. I tried to get the film from him, couldn't get it.
Who was the photographer, and what was that? I remember reading the book. What were those circumstances?
His name was Marshall Hawkins, and it happened out near Middleburg. She was riding with, I think it was the Orange County Hunt, and I was surveilling her by vehicle. We didn't ride with her on horses because the service thought it was too dangerous, too expensive, and so we surveilled her from a vehicle. And I noticed there was somebody down in the bushes near one of the fences that they were going to have to jump. And before I could do anything, he stood up. Mrs. Kennedy and the horse approached the fence. The horse saw the photographer and just put its front hoofs into the ground. Mrs. Kennedy went right over the head of the horse, luckily over the fence, with her hands and arms extended, and did a roll, got right back up, got right back on the horse, and rode off. She wasn't hurt. But I was mad myself. I chased the photographer and finally got him, and but I didn't get the film.
So you were between 28 and like 32, and she was between 31 and 34, 35.
That's right.
When you knew her the most.
That's right. We were almost the same age. And she had, when I was there in 1960, when I started with her, right after the election, Caroline was then 3 years of age. I, at that time, had a young boy who was 4 years of age. And so we had that one child that was similar in age. And then John was born in 1960, and I had another boy in 1961. So we had children almost the same age.
I went back and researched the years that the children were born, and Caroline in 1957, a miscarriage in 55, stillborn child in 56.
Correct.
Were you there for that? No,
No.
You wouldn't have been.
No.
And John Jr. in 60, and then of course you mentioned Patrick Bouvier Kennedy in 63. What was it like for you to be around her when the children were born, and was the president there?
When John was born in November 1960, no, the president was not there because he had come back to Georgetown to be with Mrs. Kennedy and Caroline for Thanksgiving. But he left that evening and flew back to Palm Beach. He was setting up his cabinet and everything. And when he left that evening to go to Palm Beach, I found that Mrs. Kennedy was going to go to bed for the night, so I went to my home. A couple hours later, I get a phone call. She had been taken by ambulance to Georgetown Hospital, so I rushed over there, and John was born. The president was on his way to Florida at the time. We couldn't get in touch with him until he got on the ground in Florida. At that time, we were notified to him what was going on. He got on the press plane that was accompanying him because it was faster. They turned it around and flew back to Washington, so he got back early in the morning and came to the hospital to see Mrs. Kennedy and the new baby.
How did you remember all this?
You know, it's just embedded in my mind.
Did you keep notes?
I did, but I destroyed them a few years ago, which really made it more difficult.
Why did you destroy them?
I promised that I would never write a book. I vowed that I would never do so, never contribute to a book, never talk to anybody about it. And so just to kind of make sure I would never get myself involved, I burned everything. There were a few mementos I kept, but for the most part, I burned all my notes. And now, when the opportunity presented itself and I decided to do it, I had to go back and talk to other agents who I worked with who still have some notes, and to check everything through newspaper archives for dates and times and places to make sure I was accurate. And so it was very tedious to go through this and write the book.
Do you remember the year you burned your notes?
This is 2012. It was after maybe 2005, something like that.
So what changed your mind that you wanted to, what really changed your mind? That you wanted to write a book?
Well, really, what Lisa Montgomery said, that this was historical, and what the White House former reporters told me, and also the fact that I had read a number of books written about Mrs. Kennedy. And for the most part, a lot of the information in there is not very true. And I thought it was time that somebody brought out the truth, what she was really like, what kind of a person she was. And that was one of the big reasons I wrote it.
You say that she lived in 7 different houses when you were guarding her?
Well, let's see. Was it 7? Cape Cod, Palm Beach, 2 in Palm Beach. Well, 2 in Cape Cod, that's 4. She spent a lot of time at Hammersmith Farm up in Newport, that's 5. Middleburg is 6, and they had another house at Middleburg is 7. Camp David, the White House, 3307 N Street in Georgetown, the Harriman House in Georgetown, another house across the street. It's a lot more than 7.
Why did she need all those different places?
Well, they left 3307 N Street in Georgetown to go to the White House, and then they sold it. After the assassination, and she had to leave the White House, she didn't have a place to go. Ambassador Harriman offered his house for she and the children to live in, and they moved there, and the Harrimans moved to a hotel. Then the house across the street became available, and so she bought that house. Then over a course of time, the local bus company owner decided this would be a great tourist attraction, and he started running tourist buses by there, and we couldn't stop him. We tried. He refused to stop. And so she finally decided it's time to move from this area, and she decided to move back to New York City. And so we went to New York, and she found a place at 1040 Fifth Avenue. So that was another residence I forgot to mention. On the Cape, they owned a house in the Kennedy compound, but it got very congested there because of the business of the president. With all the press and everything else. So the first year they stayed in their own home, but realizing how busy it was, they had a place on Squaw Island the next 2 years. In fact, 2 different places. One was Morton Downey's house, the other house was another house. Same in Palm Beach. They originally stayed with Ambassador Kennedy in his house. but it just got to be too much for everybody. And so they were had a friend who had a home, and they leased a house from C. Michael Paul in Palm Beach. Anyway, in Middleburg, they leased a place, a 400-acre place called Glenora. Well, the owner of Glenora, finally terminated the lease. So they had to build a house, and they built a house which she finally named Wexford. We called it Atoka, but that was another house she lived in.
What kind of trouble did that cause for you?
Well, it meant that every place there was a residence, we had to reestablish security, had to set up new communications. White House Communications Agency had to do that. So it caused problems. When she built the house in Middleburg called Wexford, we built in that house some security devices. Well, then they decided to rent the house for the first summer. That created a problem. But eventually she did move into the house, and she lived a very short period of time.
You found yourself out there in Middleburg, places like that, in Cape Cod, just with her and your other protection group, but the president wouldn't be there. How often were these two apart? It seemed like I read a lot.
They were separated a lot because of his business, his traveling and everything else, and then she wanted to spend a lot of time away from the White House, and she did. Spent a lot of time in Middleburg. We would go out there usually on Friday and stay until at least Monday, sometimes till Tuesday. Excuse me. The president would come out either Saturday, sometimes Friday, but usually Saturday, and return to Washington Sunday because of business.
What did you think of their relationship?
From what I saw firsthand, I was there, they were a very loving couple, had a great deal of respect for each other, depended on each other, and supported each other. I saw nothing other than a very loving husband and wife, and very devoted parents to two children.
I'm sure you've seen this, and I got to ask you about this because there's nothing about this in the book. Here's an interview with Meredith Vieira that was on NBC a couple of months ago.
Most mornings, when I woke up, I thought, I don't want to get up and write this book. I want to hide under the covers. And
what made you then get out from under the covers?
I think when you keep a secret and when you keep silent about something, you do it because you think it's keeping you safe. But in fact, it's deadly.
The secret, claims Alford, started in the summer of 1962, when the 19-year-old debutante from a prominent New Jersey family began what she says was an 18-month affair with President John F. Kennedy. The revelation was first revealed in 2003, when historian Robert Dallek wrote in his biography of JFK that a tall, slender, beautiful White House intern was rumored to be among the president's many paramours. At the time, Mimi declined to offer details. She issued a short statement and then disappeared. Now she is talking and says that her first close encounter with the president took place in this indoor heated pool at the White House. The invitation came from the president's aide, Dave Powers.
Had you heard this before she published her book?
No, not really, no.
Did you read the book?
Part of it.
What did you think?
I questioned how she could get up in the morning and look herself in the mirror.
Why do you think she wrote it?
Money.
I mean, I've quoted in your book that they had a close, loving relationship, basically what you just said here. Mm-hmm. But when you read this book, she went all over the country to be with him, and they're even, right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, she was supposedly somewhere in the White House, and you never saw any evidence of this.
I never saw her, never met her, never knew about her, never knew of her. Now, I was with Mrs. Kennedy, and we were gone a lot. This allegedly happened in the 62 area. In 62, we were in the early spring, we were in Pakistan and India. I was there for about 6 weeks. In the summer, we were either in Cape Cod or in Ravello, Italy. So we weren't at the White House a great deal of time, but I never knew this person, never saw her.
But your book is without any controversy in it whatsoever. And I wonder, I mean, you were upset, I know the last time we talked about Oliver Stone's movie, and Gerald Blaine was, what should we believe and what matters?
Well, I'm just telling it like it is, like showing you what she was like. I have no reason to do otherwise. If people want to believe what they want to believe, nothing I can do about that. But this is Mrs. Kennedy as I knew her. This is the way our relationship, how it existed from 1960 to 1964 and beyond. And there's just no reason to put anything in there that's not true.
If you go on Amazon.com, there are 50-some reviews, at least when we're recording this, about your book, and about 52 of them are 5-star positive. Have you read any of them?
A few, but not very many. I'm not too great with a computer yet, but I'm learning.
The reason why I mentioned, I want to read one to you,
Yes.
And it's full of nothing but praise about your book. And then it says, I learned more than a few fascinating insights from this book. One, Jackie was more of an athlete than I thought. It wasn't just Ethel and the other Kennedys who were the athletic gals. Two, she was incredibly self-centered. Stop there for a minute. Was she?
Somewhat, I would guess, but not completely, not overwhelmingly, no.
And then three, I have a tad more empathy for President Kennedy and his hound dog ways. Jackie was missing in action a heck of a lot of the time.
Well, we were gone a lot, but it was, and I don't know what was transpiring while we were gone, so I really can't comment about anything that's been alleged about him.
All right, now this is about you. If Mr. Hill had opened up his personal life as he is telling the story, I think this could have been a much more powerful book. Last sentence. Anyone know how the Hill kids turned out? Did Clint's wife divorce him? If not, she should get a medal.
Well, my wife and I are not together and haven't been for some time.
She's still alive.
Yes. I have two sons. They both live in this Virginia area. They're both employed. They have children, and so they're happy.
Did you have any regrets? I mean, that's what they're getting at, that you were away 80% of the time.
Oh, sure, because my sons grew up without me. And for all intents and purposes, they never really knew me. We're closer now than we were then because of that fact. So I have that regret. It put a very big strain on my marriage, there's no question about it. But it was my job, something I really enjoyed and wanted to do and did.
You say you left the service, Secret Service, when you were 43 years old.
Yes.
And now, if I gather right, you're close to 80.
I am 80. Well, that's on the calendar, I'm 80.
but not on the calendar, you're what, 60?
52.
52. You had the bad period there. When was the bad period when you talk about living in the basement and drinking?
76 to 82. About 6 months after I retired. And then until a doctor finally told me that it was either quit what I was doing or die.
And what was it like? What were your days like?
Oh, I'd just get up in the morning and drink. I didn't do anything. I would have friends would come and see me. I wouldn't even respond to them. I mean, I recall two of them coming. I was down in the basement on the couch. I never even got up. I didn't want anything to do with anybody, and didn't have anything to do with anybody. Finally, I started to snap out of it when the doctor convinced me that, I had to change. I went cold turkey. Wasn't easy. I almost wore out shirt pockets trying to get at the cigarettes that weren't there anymore. But over a period of time, I just got better and better until 1990. I was good enough. I went back to Dallas, and that helped a lot.
And what did the doctor tell you that got you out of it in 81?
He told me I was either going to die. I was going to die if I kept on what I was doing, because I was damaging every part of my body I could damage, and that apparently scared me enough to make the change, and so I did.
In the book, though, you also talk about pain. Can you describe the pain you're talking about all through this?
It's emotional pain, and some agents that I worked with still are going through that pain, and they will not even talk about the assassination. I was reminded every day about what had happened in some way or another, whether it was a news article, a TV show, a song, or anything else. It was something there that reminded me. And it really pained me because I had failed. Nobody wants to be a failure, but I had failed in trying to protect the president. And I knew that, and it just killed me.
Well, the day we're talking, in May, here's your picture in the paper today in the Washington Post.
I know that, and it's always there. It's a reminder, and I'm reminded all the time. But I've now, because of my contributing to the Kennedy detail book and now writing this book myself, have been able to emotionally kind of climb the ladder, thanks to Lisa McCubbin, who helped me get out of that dungeon that I was in. If it hadn't been for that, I'd probably still be there.
What is your reaction to this? This is a Post piece, and it's just looking at the Secret Service and the problems that came from Colombia. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I was shocked when I heard about it. I'm very glad that the director took immediate action, and without, prior to the time anybody knew about it, they knew about it, and he took immediate action. Before any press inquiries or anything else, he took action. But I'm really saddened to know that the entire agency is being painted with the same brush, and so that everybody has that sense that they don't trust him anymore, probably. And yet, they continue to work day in and day out. Right in the midst of all this, they secretly take the president to Afghanistan in the middle of the night, and he has a successful trip there and back. And that's what they do on a day-to-day basis. They shouldn't be blamed for something that 9 or whatever the number is other people did, which was really wrong, irresponsible, extremely poor judgment. Stupid is a better word for it all, and that's what they were.
Who's James Rowley?
He was the director from 1961 until 1973.
Of the Secret Service.
Of the Secret Service.
I don't know whether you've ever heard this tape or not, but here's Lyndon Johnson and Jim Rowley talking on the phone.
Don't make any requests in my name unless I approve of it.
Yes, sir.
I just think it's outrageous. Another thing here, your damn Secret Service car stays up right behind me every trip, and you're going to kill more people than you save. It doesn't do any good to be right close to me, and all you're doing is running over little children, and you ran over a man's foot here. I'm writing him apologizing for breaking his foot. And some of the old man's guns are going to go off and cause more danger than anything else. I wish you'd tell them to stay a little bit behind me so that they won't run over the people that try and shake hands with me.
Yes, sir.
I'm writing this fellow in Georgia. His name is Charles B. Wheeler. He's Assistant Chief of Police.
Charles B.
Secret Service car ran over him at College Park and broke his foot. It's now in a cast.
Right, sir.
So that's what I've been telling them about. They like to stay right in 1 foot of me, and I don't know why.
Yes,
if they'd stay 30 yards behind, it'd be so much safer. When I'm driving, I stop in a hurry, they're liable to hit my bumper and break my neck.
Right.
But they won't be instructed to do it. And then Walter, I think, told you about all those men at the ranch, or I did.
Yes, sir. You did, sir. I got a memory.
They've got 26 Mercury automobiles, according to the Ford Motor Company, and they think it's outrageous. And the Republicans are going to be writing stories on it. You've had them at Fredericksburg for months, and we couldn't use them if we were down there.
I see. Yes, sir.
And you might need 1 or 2 when we go and pick them up in Austin, but I sure wouldn't have Ford stationing 26 there. I haven't been home since before Easter.
That's right, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So what are you hearing?
Well, at least Mr. Rowley had the ability to only talk to him by phone. He would talk to me in that same way, and he would poke me in the chest at the same time because that was about 2 feet from him, and it was painful. But that was Lyndon Johnson, and that's the way he treated myself and everybody else. But I understood, he was just venting. That's what he would do, would vent, and then he'd be fine. He'd get it off his chest.
I'm also looking at a obituary on this day that we're taping of the former Dallas medical examiner, a fellow by the name of Earl Rose, who examined everybody at the assassination, the whole around it. J.D. Tippit, the police officer, Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby, and all the people that were involved in that day. But the Secret Service didn't allow him to do an autopsy on President Kennedy. Why?
Because it was going to take too long. We wanted, first of all, Vice President Johnson was in Dallas as well, and we wanted him to leave. He would not leave until Mrs. Kennedy was ready to go. Mrs. Kennedy wouldn't leave without the president's body. So we wanted to get the president's body back to Washington. We thought, since he's president of all the people, the autopsy should be done in Washington at one of the military facilities, either Walter Reed or Bethesda. So they said in Dallas, the medical examiner, Dr. Rose, and others, that the law said that they had to do the autopsy there in Dallas, since the homicide had occurred in Dallas. We understood the law, and a judge came in and even told us this was a law, there's nothing you can do about it. We finally just said, we're going to have to go anyway. And so they finally acquiesced. They said, okay, then you have to have a medical professional go with the body and stay with it all the time, and we did. Now, I understand the article indicates that they let us go because Mrs. Kennedy wanted to leave. Well, yes, she wanted to leave, but Mrs. Kennedy, I don't think, even had a conversation with Dr. Rose, or with any conversation regarding leaving.
Well, in this obit, it says Dr. Rose believed many of those theories wouldn't have gained traction, meaning the conspiracy theories, if he had been able to do his job.
Well, I don't know that that's true. I mean, sure, there are theories that speculate everything from our changing, removing the body and putting a different body in the casket and all other kinds of things, which are absolutely stupid, ridiculous, and dumb. Nothing was done that in any way changed the outcome. The body was taken to Bethesda in Maryland. The autopsy was performed under the observation of FBI agents and Secret Service agents, and the results are known.
As an aside, by the way, the fellow we talked about in the last interview, Vince Palomaro,
yeah.
You've seen his letter to the about your book?
I've not read it, no.
I'm sure you probably know that he said that Mrs. Kennedy and Me is highly recommended to everyone for its honesty and rich body of truth. He actually fully endorsed your book, even though he's been critical of...
Well, I'll accept his endorsement.
Are you worried that he's being...
Well, maybe he has some secret agenda, I don't know, but I accept his praise. Thank you.
In your book, you say that you and Mrs. Kennedy never talked about the assassination. Why not?
Yeah, well, I was not going to bring it up, and she never did. It was something that she just really didn't talk about with anyone. Even today, if you go to the Kennedy Library in Boston, you'll find that the assassination, there is only one reference to it. It's at the very end of a tour that people take. There's simply the Walter Cronkite statement. Other than that, there's no reference to the assassination whatsoever. It's the entire library is based on his life and his legacy.
You say that when she slept, you slept.
Yes, which wasn't much.
How did you do this? If there were only a couple of you taking care of her, I mean, how would, if you were asleep, if she was asleep, who was protecting?
Well, we used the field agents as supplements for the midnight shift. For example, in New York, a New York agent would be there to work when we didn't work. But when she moved, we were with her. And we had field office agents supplementing us even then. I mean, to drive us around. We didn't know New York City that well. The New York field office agents did. They knew where to go. They had great contacts. If we wanted to go to a certain restaurant, they could get in touch with that restaurant and set it up for us. So they did a lot of our work for us. But we accompanied her all the time.
So after the assassination and you were there in Dallas, how did you approach the next 48, 72 hours? What was your life like?
I was completely devoted to making sure that she was okay, that whatever she needed, we were going to make sure she had, that I didn't get hardly any sleep. The morning of the 23rd, I went home about 6 in the morning, just showered, shaved, ate something, and came right back to work. And worked until midnight that night, and finally went home and got a few hours sleep. Same way for the rest of that week. And then on Thanksgiving Day, that following Thursday, we flew to Massachusetts so that she could talk to his father. So, I mean, it was something we had to do because there weren't any other people to take our place, and we knew that she would want us with her, and we wanted to be with her.
And so where were you during that time period? Where exactly did you go with her?
Every place she went.
Where did she go? What was her life like in those?
Well, we left Bethesda Hospital with the body at about 4 o'clock in the morning on the 23rd. Went back to the White House. The body was placed in state in the East Room. She and some members of the family were there. She then went to the second floor. I went to my office, which was on the ground floor. When I found out that she had gone to sleep and she was in for a while, I went home and shaved, showered, and changed clothes, ate something, came back. Then during the day, that day on the 23rd, she began to set plans for the funeral. And she had Sergeant Shriver, her brother-in-law, set up an office in the White House and worked with other people. And she wanted it done a certain way, and they did it that way. That afternoon, I took her over to Arlington National Cemetery. We met Secretary of Defense there, Mcnamara, and they walked around that area looking where they wanted the president to be buried. They picked out the spot, and we went back to the White House. The next morning was the day, Sunday the 24th, the body was to there would be a service in the East Room for a family and staff. Then the body was to be taken to the Capitol. President and Mrs. Johnson would come over to the White House because they were living at the Elms, his personal residence, and they would pick she and the children up and accompany President Kennedy's body to the U.S. Capitol, placed in state. But before that happened, I was over in the East Wing of the White House conferring with my boss, Gerald Bain, and the phone rang, and it was General Mchugh, the Air Force aide to President Kennedy, saying Mrs. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy were on the main floor of the White House and they wanted to see the president's body. So I ran over, and Mchugh and I opened the casket to make sure everything was okay and allowed them to go see the president. In the process, she asked me to get her a pair of scissors, and I got the scissors, and she did what she wanted to do. And then
Did she cut a piece of his hair off?
Yes, she did.
What did she do with that, do you know?
I do not know. She had it, but I don't know what she did with it.
And also the guards that were around the casket, what was the instructions to them?
At first, General Mchugh asked the officer in charge to have the guards move out of the office, move out of the room, the East Room, and she said, "Oh no, just have them turn around so that we can have some privacy." And so that's what they did. They took 3 steps back and faced away from the casket, and that's when she and Bobby Kennedy went up and looked at the president in the casket.
Why did she decide to walk to St. Matthews, which is, how far would you say that's away from the White House?
Oh, it's less than a mile, I suppose. But she wanted to walk the entire route.
From the Capitol? Or?
All the way. Capitol, from the White House to the Capitol, back to the White House to St. Matthews to Arlington. But finding out that all these heads of state were going to be there, some were in their 80s, she finally acquiesced and said, okay, she'd only walk from the White House to St. Matthews. So even then, that was a problem, but you couldn't talk her out of it. I tried, but I couldn't.
There's more of a story to the salute from John Kennedy Jr. that he had been taught to salute before that day. What was it?
Well, back in early November, Mrs. Kennedy came to me and said, you know, President Kennedy's going to go to Arlington National Cemetery on November 11th to pay tribute to the troops. And I would want John to go with him, and I want him to salute his father like all the military will. But he doesn't know how. Can you guys teach him? I said, sure. So the agents that were working with him, Bob Foster and Lynn Meredith, Tommy Wells, they started to work with him. And they got him to going pretty good. I mean, he saluted quite well. Most of the time he was using his left hand.
Was he 3?
He was then 3, yeah. Not quite 3. And so he went with his father And he did very well. So then during the process of the funeral, we were up in the Capitol, and he got a little rambunctious, and the agents took him down the hall to a side office. And they tried to figure out what to do, keep him busy, so they had him practice his salute. And he always did it with his left hand. There was a Marine colonel standing in the doorway watching this. He just shook his head. Came walking in, apparently. Guy wasn't there. This is what the agents told me. Came walking in and said, "John, you've got it all wrong." And he showed him how to salute. And that stuck with him. He did learn how with his right hand. It took the agents forever trying to teach him to do it, and he just didn't quite get it. And this Marine colonel took him about 2 minutes maybe, and he taught him how to salute. And the day of the funeral, as the president's body was removed from the church, placed on the caisson to go back to Arlington, Mrs. Kennedy just bowed down and said into John's ear, "Salute your father," and he did.
We're about out of time. When you were working on the Ford detail, President Ford was either shot at twice, or there are 2 women in prison because of what they did. Did they actually shoot at him, both of them?
That happened 1 month after I retired.
Oh, it did?
And but one of them did actually shoot at him. The bullet went over his head. Another one, the gun didn't go off because an agent jammed his thumb between the hammer and the cylinder.
The reason I bring that up is that, and we only have about a minute left or so, knowing what you've been through, living the bad years when, the drinking and all that stuff, what would you recommend, God forbid this ever happened again, what would you recommend to somebody that is doing what you did to avoid this kind of personal difficulty?
Willingly seek counsel. That's the first thing. See a psychiatrist. Talk to people about what you've gone through. Get it out. Because holding it in is what caused me the problem. I didn't talk to anybody. Other agents, my family, anyone. I kept everything inside, and that's what really got me.
The end of the book, before the epilogue, you write in the last couple sentences, "We had been through so much together, Mrs. Kennedy and me, more than anyone can imagine," and then you end it by saying, "more than anyone can ever know." Is there a lot that we don't know, a lot kept out of this book?
Oh, not a lot kept out of the book. Yes, she and I had secrets. They're not in the book because that's what they are, secrets. A few of them are revealed about her smoking. Most people didn't know that. The fact
3.5 packs a day.
Well, I don't know if it was that much. My smoking, perhaps, yeah, but her, no, not that much. Also, that she loved to read tabloids.
And you had to go get them.
I was the one that had to buy them, but there are a lot of little secrets that she and I had. They'll always remain secret.
You're not going to put them somewhere in a bottle and hide them until 50 years from now?
No, I don't plan to do that.
Clint Hill, the author, Special Agent, United States Secret Service with Lisa McCubbin. The book is called Mrs. Kennedy and Me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For a DVD copy of this program, call 1-877-662-7726. For free transcripts or to give us your comments about this program, visit us at qna.org. Q&A programs are also available as C-SPAN podcasts.
Next Sunday,